Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's study call. As I mentioned on our last study call, we were going to be going into a study of The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles. Just a few notes about this book. This book was written around the turn of the century, or let me see if it says in the front here. I think this is a reprint, so I'm not sure if it'll have the original. So it's first published in 1910. So older book, similar to the book that we just did by Genevieve B. Rand, that these are a little bit older books. Part of the reason why there's a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons why I do a little bit of these older books is because of copyright issues. I can't do these daily study calls and stuff with things that are copyrighted and basically, read their words over this channel or on these daily study calls without their permission. And so some of the things that we study, they're a little bit older, so that there's not that it's just slipped my mind what it's called. The copyright is no longer there. And so we do some of the studies of these older books. I think some of these older books are really great. They have so many really great principles. The only thing that I think that they lack that we have is that we have modern science and modern technology that helps us to actually prove the principles that they teach. But as far as the spiritual principles themselves, they weren't lacking in their understanding. They weren't lacking in how they applied these things. They knew the principles and they applied them. They got the same kind of results that people that know these principles are experiencing today. And in some ways, a lot of our modern technology gets in the way a little bit, that we feel like we need to prove and analyze everything instead of moving forward on things with a little bit of faith and just trying to create out of faith in our life. We need to have everything proven to us. And so in some ways that they were benefited by the lack of advancements in science, but I think that the advancements in science far outweigh any negatives there, as long as we're aware of them and as long as we take strides to overcome them. Now, also because that it is an older book, the language in it is often a little bit older. Some of the phrasing can be a little bit older. And when we come across those things, I usually make my best effort to kind of reframe them and bring them into more modern phraseology. And then the other thing too is that oftentimes, because of the day and age, these things were often written to a very masculine audience. And so just be aware of that, that, if they use man and mankind and different kinds of things like that, it doesn't mean that these things don't work just as well for women. And they do. I know women that use these principles that are taught in these books and that are very successful. And not just in financial ways, but just in whatever it is that they're seeking after. And so let's hop in here. Now, Wallace D. Wattles, I don't actually know a ton about his background, but what little I do know is that he was a farmer, and but that he was a very successful farmer, and that he wrote this book, and it wasn't, I don't think, too widely put out there at the time, but it was picked up by some key individuals, and it kind of followed down through the years to where it was picked up by and recommended to a lady by the name of Rhonda Byrne. And then she made a movie based off of that book and some of the principles of this book and some of the principles in it, called The Secret. And she brought in, it's more of a documentary. It's not really a movie, but a documentary where she interviews a lot of just self-help, prosperity mindset teachers in our day and age, or successful people. There's a few case studies of kind of amazing things that could happen. Like there's a guy that survives a plane crash where basically his whole body was in a cast and he was told he would never walk again, but he used the power of his mind and he walks and, is, I'm not sure if he's still alive. But at the time of the making of the movie back in, I think 2005 is when the movie came out, he was still alive. And also this book isn't a very large book. The chapters themselves are fairly short, kind of this very similar to our last study in Genevieve B. Rand's Your Invisible Power. But at the same time, even though the book isn't large, it's jam-packed with lots of really good information. And so it will take us a while to go through this study. Genevieve B. Rand's book was about 100 pages long. And this one's about 100 and, let's see, again, just over 100 pages, about 120 pages. And so it'll probably take us about the same amount of time, maybe a little longer, to go through this book as we did Your Invisible Power. So we'll be in this book for the next month or so. And it's going to be great. I think you guys are going to really love it. This was the first book that I read as far as, I guess, the more spiritual side of me seeking to improve myself. I had read other books. I had, kind of perused a little bit, Think and Grow Rich. But honestly, at the time, being in my late teens, early 20s, I didn't really understand a lot of what I was reading. And so I went on to some other books that were a little bit more practical in nature, as far as, they were teaching, hey, do this step, do this step, do this step. Now he does talk about some practical applications in here, but there's also, it's a lot more of a spiritual book, a lot more of a philosophical thing that then we can take the principles and then apply them into our life. So it doesn't give you, like, you go do this. But what he says is more along the line of everybody's an individual. Everybody is going to have a different path as they're going after and seeking after these things in their own life. And so the things that you're going to do and the things that another person are going to do are going to be different along your path. So he can't give you specifics in this understanding, and neither can I. I can't give you specifics on what it is that you should do. Like I can't tell you whether you should go be a doctor or a lawyer, whether you should get a business degree, or whether you should get an art degree and become an artist. I can't tell you any of those kinds of things. But what I can tell you are the principles on how to be in our thoughts, in our emotional state, and in our actions, the things that we can do so that it will uncover that purpose for you, the thing that would bring you the most joy and satisfaction in your life, and that you would just be thrilled every morning to wake up and go do. So let's jump right into this. If there's any other, I think, things to start this off that come to my mind as we're going through, I'll make mention of it, but I think that's a good enough introduction to this book. And we're going to go into the preface. This book is pragmatical, not philosophical. Now, I just told you that that wasn't necessarily true. Now, he does give pragmatic steps. He does give you things that you can do, but it is very much philosophical in nature too. It's a practical manual, not a treatise upon theories. Now, when he says that it's a practical manner, not a treatise upon theories, for you as an individual, these ideas might only be theories. So until you put them into practice and prove to yourself that they are true, then they are only theories. But then at that point, if you prove that they are true to yourself, then they become it becomes truth. It becomes a way that you'll probably want to, then live your life pattern on those ideas moving forward, because these ideas that are going to be expressed into this, these scientific ideas are a way for you to create anything that you want in your life, for you to become any kind of person that you want, and to do any kind of thing that you want to do. And so that's why he said it's a practical manual and it's not theoretical. It's because he and many others that have done these principles have proved that they work, that you can create anything that you want in your life. And so it's moved from the realm of theory into a practical understanding. And so that's kind of what he means there. It is intended for the men and women whose most pressing need is for money, whose wish to get rich first and philosophize afterward. It is for those who have so far found neither the time, the means, nor the opportunity to go deeply into the study of metaphysics, but who want results and who are willing to take the conclusions of science as a basis for action, without going into all the processes by which those conclusions were reached. And so definitely, I think that statement is true. There are lots of books out there where you can delve really deeply into the metaphysical aspect, the mental sciences, where you can see why these things work. And I think even with modern advances of science, we understand more about the brain, we understand more about the body, we understand more about the world around us, so that we see that these principles are true. But if you don't have the time to go in and study all of those things at this moment, and your most pressing need is to manifest something in your life, whether it's wealth or health, or you're wanting a certain kind of relationship, or anything other thing in your life, if that's your most pressing need, and these principles that we're going to study in here are going to teach you how to obtain those things. And then after obtaining that, if it frees up your time in such a way that then you can go and study some of these kinds of things, I would highly recommend that, because I think it's very valuable, and you will see that it increases your faith. It increases your understanding of these principles, so that then you're able, I think, to manifest and to create the life around you even more and even better. It is expected that the reader will take the fundamental statements upon faith, just as he would take statements concerning a law of electrical action if they were promulgated by a Marconi or an Edison. So again, at that time, Marconi, Edison were very well-known inventors and scientists. And so in our day and age, we might say somebody like, I'm forgetting his name, Elon Musk, I think would be an equivalent in our day and age of some of these kind of people. They are very successful as well. And taking the statements upon faith that he will prove their truth by acting upon them without fear or hesitation. So I agree with what he's talking about here, and this is something that I learned. It was actually difficult for me to learn, because I wanted, as I mentioned earlier, I think modern man is kind of in this state because of some of our modern advances, that we want things to be proven to us before we try them out, before we even seek to try to do anything with them in our life. And so he's saying here to just take these on faith. And so it was a difficult thing for me to study some of these kinds of things and to do them by faith, not knowing what the end result is. I was brought up in a religious environment, and so there was a little bit of apprehension there that, am I going to be sinning? Am I going to be breaking God's commandments by trying some of these kinds of things? And I know I'm still am a religious person, and I do believe in a God, and do exercise faith along those lines. But when I receive something new, when I'm studying a book and they're talking about something that I've never heard before, whereas before, if it conflicted with my current state of view, my paradigm, so to speak, that I would often just reject those and wouldn't even want to even, consider them. But I had a few experiences where I did allow myself, because I wanted so much some of the things that these authors were talking about. I wanted the results in my life, that I was willing to test and try some of these kinds of things. And I had some really profound experience where, I mean, life transforming some of these experience, to where I realized that my previous paradigm, my previous way of understanding and looking at things was wrong, that I was wrong, and that the things that I was taught growing up, not all of them, but maybe in this one specific instance, this principle was wrong. And that I learned a new way of approaching these things, and that it transformed my life. And so after having that experience, a couple of times, I got to the idea that, okay, I want to test these things. I want to try them. And if it's for my good, then great. I can incorporate it into my life. I can see how the old paradigm, the false ideas that I was under, were wrong, and I can put them away, and I can accept these new ideas and incorporate them as part of my being. Or if it doesn't lead me towards anything good, I can put them away. Now, one thing though that I would caution you all is if you try to apply some of these principles and you don't get the results that you're looking for, there's one of two things that I've found from my own personal experience that may be happening. One, you may be misapplying the principle. And so in that case, if I come to something and it doesn't seem to be working the way that the author, or, whatever way that it was that I learned that principle had described it, then I look back and say, am I applying this correctly? And I might even go back and study what it was that they taught, if I felt like it was worthwhile, to truly try to understand what it was that they were saying. Did I misunderstand them? Am I misapplying this principle? Sometimes I found that I was, and I started applying it correctly, and I got the results. Other times I found, no, I'm applying it exactly the way that they described, or it appears to be so, and I'm not getting the result. And so I'm going to, maybe for them, maybe there were other things going on subconsciously that they didn't realize was going on that made that work. And they just didn't know enough to express those ideas. And maybe if I was to have those same things and then apply that principle, then it would work. So I don't ever just toss things out and say, I'm never going to look at them again. But at least for now, those don't fit into my paradigm. They don't fit into my worldview, and they're not giving me the results that I'm looking for and wanting. And so, and then the other thing is that, the principle is wrong. And so then you can just toss it aside. So those are the two ways that if something's not working for you, consider. And I wouldn't lightly just toss something aside without, going and studying something first. And so this was a long road for me in learning to open my mind, to learn how to test and try things. And what I actually found out is that if you actually study, I'm a Christian myself. If you go through and study the Christian writings, the Bible, they actually teach this idea that we should actually test things, that we should actually try things, that we should actually plant the seeds in our hearts and see if they bear good fruit. If they bear good fruit, then we can know that they're good principles. If they bear bad fruit, meaning that we don't get what we were hoping, or we get something negative by applying those principles, then we can know that it isn't good and we can toss it aside. So the scriptures actually do teach us to be very open-minded. They teach us to consider these things and to consider the idea that we may not understand things correctly when we're presented with a new idea. Now, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just, whenever we get some new idea, just toss out every old thing that we know and accept this new thing without any reservation. No, but we go to it with purpose. We go to it with a clear intention of what it is that we're doing, so that we can see the results of it. The monastic theory of the universe, the theory that one is all and that all is one, that one substance manifests itself as the seeming many elements of the material world, is of Hindu origin and has been gradually winning its way into the thought of the Western world for 200 years. It is the foundation of all the Oriental philosophies and of those of Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Schopenhauer, Hegel, and Emerson. The reader who would dig to the philosophical foundations of this is advised to read Hegel and Emerson for himself. So this idea, we talked about this in the study of Your Invisible Power by Genevieve Behrend, is that there is this power, there is a substance that is behind everything, that is flowing through everything. And we're going to go into a study of that idea more in this book as well. And that idea is generally of, or I think that the Hindus, some of the Eastern religions and Eastern philosophies teach this idea, I think, a little bit better than some Western religions and Western thought. But for my own personal feeling, I believe that this is true, that we're all part of some whole, but that we have been broken off, or that we've been born, or we've been created, and that we are an individual too. So part of this experience that we call life, as we're here upon the earth, is to try to learn how to use that individuality to bless ourselves and the rest of the whole. That the person down the street from you or your neighbor isn't so far removed from you as you might think, that they are closer to you than they might appear, and that by doing good for them, you're doing good for yourself. Because it's kind of the idea that if you were to imagine that everything, all of creation, is like a body, in the Christian scriptures talk about this in the sense of talking about the body of Christ, that all is as one body. Now, if you are the knee, then you have a specific purpose, you have a specific function, you have a specific thing that you can do that's going to benefit and bless the rest of the body. And if you can find out what your purpose is, what part of the body that you inhabit, and the thing that you are meant to do, then you can enter into blessing all of those around you and yourself. Because the knee, by acting as the knee, isn't just benefiting the body, it's benefiting itself. Because as you're able to move about, just thinking of your own body, if you weren't able to bend your knees, you would find it very difficult to move. You wouldn't be able to run. If you just had these kind of straight legs that were there, it would be very difficult to run and to move as we do. And in that sense, maybe our ancestors would have died out from starvation because they wouldn't have been able to provide for themselves. And so if we learn, and so then, the knee, by not acting in its place, would have deprived the entire body of sustenance, which then it would have died, which then the knee would have died. And so it's kind of the same idea that if you want to look at society as a body, that if you were a contributing member of society, then you're building up society to where it can work in a more harmonious and constructive manner. But if you're not entering into and doing things to help society, or a degradation to society, you're promoting the collapse of society. And then that's not going to be helping anybody. Now, there are at times different parts of society that are corrupt and that need to change. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but that dismantling all of society just because there's one problem isn't a good way to go about it. In writing this book, I have sacrificed all other considerations to plainness and simplicity of style so that all might understand. The plan of action laid down herein was deduced from the conclusions of philosophy. It has been thoroughly tested and bears the supreme test of practical experiment. It works. If you wish to know how the conclusions were arrived at, read the writings of the authors mentioned above. And if you wish to reap the fruits of their philosophies in actual practice, read this book and do exactly as it tells you to do. All right, so that is the preface to the book. We're going to end off our daily study there today. And tomorrow we'll go into chapter 1, which is called The Right to be Rich. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, I think that you're all going to really enjoy it as we go through and study this. There's so many good principles and just so many good things in this book. As I mentioned, it was my first kind of spiritual study into the mental sciences instead of practical, and it was the first one that I really understood. Um, and I had a really good teacher that helped bring out a lot of these principles, and I'm hoping that I can help in bringing out some of these principles for all of you that are joining me with this study. But it's going to be good. So with that, we'll end our study for today. Go make yourselves a wonderful day, and we will see you all on our next study.